Hello, everyone. Today, we are diving into a very important topic that impacts not only businesses in India but also our connections with the world. We will be discussing something called cross border insolvency. Cross border insolvency. All right. And how India is working to improve laws around it. Now, I know what you are thinking. Insolvency sounds a bit complicated, right? But don't worry, by the end of this, you'll understand how it works, why it's important, and what India is going to make things better. All right, so let's start with the basics. Insolvency. What is insolvency? See, insolvency happens when a person or a business it can no longer pay back the money they owe, right? So imagine if a company borrowed money from a bank, but then couldn't make enough profits to pay it back. That company is considered insolvent कि जब इतना प्रॉफिट भी नहीं जनरेट हो पा रहा कि जितना लोन अमाउंट उन्होंने लिया है उसको पे बैक करने को. Now, in India, we have a law called the Insolvency and Bankruptcy. Insolvency and Bankruptcy Law. Okay? So, Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code जो है, ये कब आया था? Basically, ये इंट्रोड्यूस जब किया गया था, उसका पर्पस क्या था? What was the purpose? See, it was introduced to deal with these situations. All right. So insolvency, IBC or simply IBC deal with these situations. This helps businesses that are struggling financially by providing rules on how to restructure or basically shut them down. But here's where it gets tricky. What happens if the company owes money to someone in another country? Or if the company has assets in a foreign country? That's where cross border insolvency comes in. ऑल राइट. तो सबसे पहले कि अगर एक कंपनी जो जिसके पास पैसे खत्म हो गए, बैंकरप्ट हो गई है, अब उसको किस तरह से रिस्ट्रक्चर किया जाएगा, उसके लिए हमारी कंट्री में एक लॉ है. इस लॉ का नाम है इंटरनेशनल इस लॉ का नाम है इंसॉल्वेंसी बैंकरप्ट कोड. राइट. नाउ द क्वेश्चन इज, अगर जो कंपनी है, इफ द कंपनी ओज मनी टू समवन हु इज इन अनदर कंट्री, दूसरी कंट्री में है, और इफ द कंपनी हैज प्रॉपर्टीज which is located in a foreign country, so what will be the situation? So that's how we deal with cross border insolvency. All right. Cross border insolvency. Now, students, to understand how India handles cross border insolvency today, we need to look at its history. Did you know that the first insolvency law in India was introduced in the year 1848 during Britishers? Okay, so during Britishers के time पे ये insolvency introduce किया गया था, right? And this law focused only on domestic it focused only on domestic insolvencies, that is meaning that the cases that are within India. Later, two more laws were introduced, जैसे Presidency Towns Insolvency Act 1909, which applied to big cities जैसे Calcutta हो गया, Bombay, Madras, and the Principal Insolvency Act 1920, right, which apply to smaller towns and rural areas. So these laws were good for handling local insolvencies, but didn't address the complexities of cross border cases. And after India gained independence, these laws remained unchanged for decades. Decades तक ऐसे ही रहे, change ही नहीं हुए. But fast forward to 1990s, India's economy was growing and globalization was on the rise, right? So businesses were no longer operating within India alone. They were trading with companies अक्रॉस द वर्ल्ड, है ना, सिर्फ इंडिया में ही रहकर वो काम नहीं कर रहे थे, बल्कि जो बाहर पूरे वर्ल्ड में जो कंपनीज है उनके साथ भी डीलिंग हो रही थी. सो दिस ब्रॉट challenges. कैसे? What if a company which is in India owed money to someone in the US or Europe? Now, there was no proper law to handle these cross border insolvency cases. And several committees, like Irani Committee in 2000 or the Irani Committee in 2005, they have basically understood this gap. Don't worry, what are these committees? Are basically government ये committees बनाती है ताकि ये proposals introduce करे और government उस पे implement कर सके, right? And these committees, they also recommended that India should adopt an international framework called UNCITRAL, or simply uh, UNCITRAL. This is a model law on cross-border insolvency, and we'll discuss this framework in detail a bit later. So, in 2016, what happened? In 2016, India introduced IBC, insolvency back uh, insolvency bankrupt uh, insolvency and bankruptcy code, right? So India introduced in the year 19 2016, right, to modernize India's insolvency laws. But the focus was still mostly on domestic cases कि जहाँ country में ही कोई company bankrupt हो गई है, right? Now let's talk about there are certain sections which are also mentioned in this news article. There's a article 233, section 233, 234, and 235. Now these sections, they were added in this law, in this insolvency bankruptcy code, to make India able to form an agreement with other countries to handle insolvency cases, right? Now it sounds good, right? But here's the problem: these sections were never properly implemented. In fact, they are often called dead letters because they exist only on paper and cannot be used in practice. Now you will be thinking that there's so much theory on this. So to give you a real life example uh, of this issue is the Jet Airways. Jet Airways is what? It's an airline company. So Jet Airways, it's a popular airline. All right, Jet Airways एक popular airline है, but it went insolvent or in the year 2019. 2019 में क्या हो गया कि ये insolvent हो गई, एक तरीके से bankrupt हो गई. Now the company had creditors in both India and Netherlands. मतलब जिन्होंने कंपनी को लेंड किया था वो दोनों इंडिया में भी थे और नेदरलैंड में भी थे. अब वो तो बोलेंगे ना कि भाई इंसॉल्वेंट हो गई है तो हमने तो इन्वेस्ट किया था, हमने तो लोन दिया था, अब हमारे पैसे कौन हमें वापस करेगा. So the problem, India didn't have reciprocal agreement with Netherlands to handle cross-border insolvency. And this created a legal mess. And the Indian tribunal called the NCLT couldn't use these sections to resolve it. So this case shows how outdated India's cross-border insolvency laws were and why we need urgent reforms, right? So what's the solution? See, several committees have suggested that we should adopt the uncitral model law, like it is there in which is adopted by many countries outside India. So we should also adopt uncitral model law on cross-border insolvency, and because this is an internationally recognized framework, so this will make it easier for countries to work together on insolvency cases. And even many committees in India, they have also suggested reforms, जैसे इंडिया के जो पार है, that we should that the government should expand the powers of Indian tribunals, राइट। तो ये सारे सोल्यूशन इसमें मेंशन किए गए हैं। Now, the challenges that are still there is, even though these reforms sound promising, progress has been slow. है ना, progress बहुत slow है. The lack of proper laws impacts foreign investment. क्योंकि अब आप ये देखो कि अगर कोई कंपनी किसी और कंट्री से, यार इफ अ कंपनी which has foreign origin and they want to basically invest in an Indian company, but we don't have proper cross insolvency laws, and what if that particular company which that foreign company in a foreign entity has invested went bankrupt? So they will be, so this will send a message to the global companies that they will be less reluctant to invest in Indian companies, right? So we need proper laws, otherwise it will impact foreign investment, and we need foreign investment for our growth, for our economic growth. So India's reputation in international trade will also be impacted, and businesses need assurance that their rights will be protected even across borders. So if we are going to adopt the ancestral model law and we will modernize the insolvency and bankruptcy code, India can actually create a predictable and reliable framework for cross border insolvencies. And this will attract investment, more investment, and will make it easier for businesses to operate. Right? Now, so what we have learned, cross border insolvency, it may sound a bit technical, but it is important for India's economic growth in a globalized world. So, from the outdated laws of the British era to the modern IBC, India has come a long way, but there's still more to do. And with right reforms, India can build a strong legal framework that not only resolves insolvency cases efficiently, but it also strengthens India's global trade relationship. All right. So, thank you for listening, and I hope you learned something new today.